Hi, I'm Sheila Layton. Welcome to the Beyond Coincidence Show, where every moment holds a miracle and we talk about seeing the hand of God in our lives. Call it a God wink or a tender mercy or whatever you want. Everyone on this show has seen the hand of God or their higher power in their lives in a very real and personal way. Welcome, everyone. Today's guest is an inspiring example of resilience and grace in the face of life-altering adversity. Emily Stewart has been married for 27 years and is a proud mother of 4 and a grandmother to 3. She's built a life grounded in family, faith, and creativity. An accomplished musician skilled in vocal performance, violin, and piano. She holds a college degree and has always embraced life with energy and passion, including a love for travel, DIYs, and time spent with loved ones. Her story is one of faith, perseverance, strength, and an unwavering will to reclaim life on her own terms. Welcome, Emily.
Hi, happy to be here.
So excited to meet you and to chat with you and to hear your story.
Yeah.
So tell me, what does life look like for you today? How many of those kids are still at home? What's happening?
We have no kids at home. We have
Oh,
4 kids, are all grown. Our youngest is in college. We have 2 that are married, one that gets married in May, and then our youngest is in college in Utah. And so we're empty nesters, which is really a fun adventure for us. We life today is honestly it's a little strange. Over the last year, it's really evolved into something that we never expected it to be. Prior to the last year, prior to January 2024, we were traveling. We were empty nester. We were living the empty nester life. We were doing whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted. We had dinner at 4 p.m. if we wanted to. We did whatever we wanted to do, and we were loving that empty nester life. And so now life is kind of like recovery and healing and exercise and things like that, which we'll get into later. But it's really more about finding our new normal, which we just, you never know how life is going to hit you. And so we are just adjusting to what our new normal is now.
that's awesome. And I'm assuming, I mean, like you say, we'll get into what happened, but the healing process is still occurring and you're
Hmm.
young and you're a grandma, so life's good. Life's great, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
So, Emily, tell me about what life was like growing up. Where did you fit in the family? Did religion play a part? How did you sort of develop a relationship with God? Kind of all those fun things.
So I'm the third of 6 kids in my family, and we were all born and raised in Tempe, Arizona. I don't live in Tempe, Arizona anymore, but that's where we were born and raised. And then I met my husband in Arizona, had our family in Arizona. So like we're Arizona people. We have since moved to Dallas, and so we're Dallas based now, but our entire lives were Arizona. And like I said, third of 6 kids, and we were a very religious family. I jokingly call my mom a leadership widow because from like literally as soon as I was born until after I was having kids of my own, my dad was in church leadership. And when I say church leadership, I mean Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so he was always gone and busy and helping other people, which I was never, at least I was never resentful of that or anything. I recognized the good that he did. What I actually missed was, makes me kind of emotional now, but you see, until I was in the same position where my husband was in leadership positions and I was holding down the fort at home, I didn't recognize um, the the impact that was for my mom. 6 kids in like I think we're like 12 years from 1 to 6,
Wow.
and so we're about 12 years apart, and so that was a lot for her. And so I have a huge amount of respect for my dad as a member of leadership who did so many great things, and so many people respect and love him for that. But I have a huge amount of respect and admiration for my mom and what that meant for her, because for her to be able to, she was the face of what religion looked like in our home. Right. And
Right.
so, because my dad wasn't there a whole lot, we knew where he was. We knew it was important. We were really grateful for the blessings that came from his leadership. But really, that responsibility, I think, mostly fell to my mom within the home. And she did an amazing job. My siblings are all still active members of the church and serving in their own communities. And I think they did a really good job. It was really important to us as a family. We did family scripture study and family home evening. And it was a really important part of our family growing up. For me personally, excuse me, I can't pinpoint a place in my life when I said this is when I gained a testimony of
Right.
my relationship with God. I always had a connection to God. I always felt like I was special to Him. I had a lot of experiences growing up where it's not really, I mean, it's part of my story, but it's not part of what I meant to bring here. But
Yeah, but
when I
it's
was,
part of who you are. So I feel like
yeah,
it's important for you to share because,
yeah,
people are all in different paths and different places in their journey. And if they
yeah,
can hear something that that helps you gain your relationship with God,
yeah.
whether it's something really dramatic like what you'll share or just something small, I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, when I was 8 years old, I started to lose my hair and we didn't really know why. And it took us months to figure out why. And it was really patchy, like it'd fall out over here and then
Oh,
grow back
wow.
and then fall out over here and grow back and so on and so forth. And so over my life, it has continued to do that. And so from the age of 8, when my hair started to fall out, I really felt different than everybody else. But I was actually really grateful that I had that connection with my Heavenly Father and with my Savior because I always felt important, regardless of the fact that I looked different than other people or I couldn't do the trendy hairstyles or whatever. In high school for a minute, I wore a wig and it was ugly and horrible. And, I knew I was different, but I really did feel a connection to my Heavenly Father from the very beginning. And when I was in high school, in seminary, which is like religious study class, for those who don't know, we were studying the Doctrine and Covenants, which is a section of scripture that we study. And we were studying in section 46 of the Doctrine and Covenants. And I remember so vividly studying this where it talks about the gifts of the Spirit and how everyone, to some is given one and to some is
Yeah.
given another, that all may be profited thereby. Right after it says that in the scriptures, it says some are given to believe on Jesus Christ. And I don't remember the exact wording, and then others are given to believe on their words. And I
Yeah.
always felt like I was one of those people who I just always believed. I just always did. I don't know where it came from. I mean, it could have come from something as simple as singing songs in church when I was very young in primary,
But
but
Emily, I do believe that is a spiritual gift because I have that
yeah,
too. Like
yeah,
I've always I've always known that my heavenly parents love me. Like
yeah,
there's been no doubt. Like
yeah,
and I just did believe. Like, I have lots of friends that struggle with different things and I feel sad for them. I mean, they're amazing people and things that they struggle with, I don't, but it would be hard for me if I did. And I have recognized that is a
yeah,
spiritual gift. The gift to believe is
absolutely.
powerful.
Yeah, and I've been really grateful for that because there have been moments in my life where things have been harder, more difficult, and I could always just rely. Like I just still believed. I never said, things are hard, he must not love me. I never said that. I never
Right.
felt that way. I always felt like things are hard, but he still loved me. I had some opportunities to talk to some high schools and young youth groups over the years about my experience with my hair loss and the adversity that came through that. And one of the things I always talked about is that I recognized from the beginning that my value was not reliant on what I look like, what I sounded like, what I did. It can't. I was inherently important to my Heavenly Father, that He loved me, period, regardless of whatever else happened. And so I was really grateful for that growing up.
Oh, yeah, especially in high school when
Yeah,
you think all of your value is based on your hair and your body and your
exactly.
clothes, right? Like that's
Exactly.
hugely powerful message to share with young people because
Yeah,
yeah, they just sometimes don't get that and that's a
they
really
don't
hard
see
thing.
it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So it sounds like that was a pretty amazing way to grow up and it
yeah, it
clearly
was.
shaped who you are.
Yeah,
Okay, so I know that you have an experience that you've been alluding to that happened only just a little over a year ago.
yeah.
So I will let you just give background and share as much
Okay.
detail as you want, and we'll just see where the hand of God was moving and all that.
Okay. I honestly, we would have to take days to describe all of the ways that the hand of God worked in this experience for me. And so I'll try to highlight some of those ways. Where to start? A year in January of 2024, my husband he had taken a new job in July of 23, and part of that job was he worked from home, which was amazing, especially as empty nesters. We could be together all the time. It was amazing and we loved it, but he had to travel a few times a month to Birmingham, Alabama. And like I said, we're Dallas based. So he would just travel for a couple of days and then he'd come home for a week or so and then he'd travel for a couple of days and whatever. Anyway, he was going on a trip in January of 2024. He'd been doing this since July. January, we'd just been really busy in like December and November with holidays and stuff. And I was like, I just want to go with you. Just don't like to be away from you. I just want to go with you. And he was like, great. I'll have work and meetings during the day, but we can hang out at night. I'm like, great. So I traveled with him. We got in on a Monday, kind of late. And so Monday night we went to bed. And Monday in the middle of the night, I woke up with a really bad headache. And I don't know if you've ever had one of those headaches that wakes you up and it's just like, you just can't think, you can't go back to sleep, you can't do anything. I just had that horrible headache.
Had you
And
ever
I was like,
had one like that before?
I mean, I've had migraines, but that's why I was familiar with headaches. You know, like those, I feel like those ones are the worst ones, the ones that wake you up in the middle of the night because they're really bad. Anyway, I took some medicine. I went back to bed. I did eventually go back to sleep. I woke up the next morning and um, I'd had a cold a few weeks before. And so I thought, I think I'm getting a sinus infection. And so I said to my husband on Tuesday, I'm going to take you to the office and then I'm going to take the car and I'm going to go to urgent care. And I'm going to tell him I have a sinus infection, get some antibiotics, and then I'll spend today resting. And tomorrow I'll feel better and we'll go party around Birmingham and check out Birmingham. He's like, great. Sure enough, I went to urgent care. And after I had dropped him off at work, I was like, I am so tired. I guess I just didn't sleep. I'm so tired. I'm going to go get a energy drink and take some like Sudafed and medicine and really try and just kick this as much as I can because I have this horrible splitting headache, some blurred vision, weird stuff going on. I just feel terrible. And so I went and got an energy
Did you
drink
just
and
think that it was a bad migraine?
I did. I thought it was a sinus infection, which I'm familiar with. And so I thought,
Yeah, because
I
like for me, I'd have
recognize,
been freaking out because I don't get
yeah,
headaches. But for somebody who gets a headache
yeah,
and knows what those are, you
yeah.
kind of aren't super worried, right?
Yeah, I wasn't at all. And especially having just flown, lots of times if you're like, sorry, my mouth is dry. If you've flown and the elevation change
Right.
and you've had sinus issues and pressure, that can kind of spawn a sinus infection. So I really did think that's what it was. So I go into urgent care and I'm like taking all these meds and she's like, "Oh, your blood pressure's kind of high." And I'm like, "Well, I'm on an energy drink and Sudafed and like all these medications trying to kick this sinus infection. I can
Okay.
see the sign." She goes, "Well, follow up with your GP when you get home." I'm like, "Great." They prescribed me an antibiotic and I went home. So this is Tuesday night. So Tuesday night he comes back and he's like, we're going to go have dinner with my coworker who I'd never met. And I was like, great. So we go to dinner and I was just exhausted. And I was like, oh my gosh, like dinner's over. Let's go home and go to bed. So we come home, go to bed. Wednesday comes and I'm like, I'll take you to the office and then I'm going to go, I'm sure I'm going to feel better. And so I'm going to go do some shopping and stuff. This is getting kind of long, but
No, it's fine. It's fine.
took him to the office. And then as I was on my way back from the office, I was like, I still actually just feel really terrible. And I don't really know what's going on. I think I just need to go rest and let my antibiotics kick in and give my body some time to recoup. So I went back to the hotel and I laid down and I slept. And then after I woke up, I was like, I still feel terrible. And so I took a shower. I was really trying to do all these things. I
Right.
noticed down in the lobby, there was like peppermint tea and I'd been kind of nauseous. And so I was like, went down to the lobby and I got peppermint tea. And I was like trying to just force myself to feel better so that we could have this nice trip that we'd planned.
Right.
And I just kept feeling worse and worse. And Wednesday night, it was time to go pick him up and it had started to rain. And I was like, great, now I've got the blurred vision kept getting worse. And the doctor had said, your blurred vision is probably a result of like a sinus infection that's just really bad. He's like,
But
it's
now
just,
you've been on the antibiotics for
yeah, for a
like
day,
for at least a
24
full
hours.
day.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, yeah. And so I'm like, okay, well, I still have blurry vision and it's starting to rain. And I drive to pick up my husband about 40 minutes away. And as soon as I get there, I'm like on the road, I'm like, I should not be driving. Like, this is not safe. And
Yeah.
so when I get to him, I'm like, you need to drive. And I said to him, he's like, do you feel better? And I said, I actually really don't. I actually still feel really terrible. And he's like, have you eaten today? And I said, no, I haven't. And he goes, it might be low blood sugar. Like, let's go get you some food and whatever. So same thing. We go get food. We go back to the hotel. I'm like, I'm exhausted. Let's go back to bed. He's like, okay. So we go home to the hotel. We get in bed. Thursday comes and I wake up and I'm like, I'm still just really not well. And he goes, oh, well, are you like okay enough for me to leave you? And I'm like, yes, go to the office. I'm sure it's fine. Go to the office. He said, I'll come back and check on you at noon. So he took the car and went to the office. And so he took a car, went to the office and came back at lunchtime and I had showered. And I do remember at one point during that day when I got in the shower, I was hoping to like steam it out really well. Like I'm still thinking sinus infection,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So I'm like, let's just steam this sucker out. Let's just turn that heat way up and just steam it out. And I passed out in the shower and
Well,
I
I
woke
could say
up
based
like
on
on
what's
the
going to
ground.
happen, that was probably the worst
Yeah.
thing you could do. Is
Yeah,
steam your body
exactly.
up.
Yeah, exactly. Raise my blood pressure, anyway. I passed out in the shower. I woke up, pulled myself together enough to get ready. And he, at some point, came back to the hotel room to pick me up. And he said he was waiting at the door long enough that he was like looking at he didn't have his room key. And so he was like looking at the elevator, like, do I go downstairs and get another room key? Like he'd knocked and I wasn't answering and wasn't answering. Then finally I came to the door and I was so unsteady. At this point, I was like my left side, I was so weak and I was like, I don't know what's going on. So I actually grabbed him by the hands and he kind of walked me back into the room. And he's like, what do we do? Like, what do we do with this? And I'm like, I don't know this. He's like, this has got to be more than a sinus infection. I'm like, I have no idea. What I knew at that point is I had Googled my symptoms, which is a horrible idea, but I probably actually should have listened to what I Googled. But I had Googled my symptoms and it came up with two things, a stroke and onset of MS. And I was like, well, a stroke, that's ridiculous. I'm 46 years old in the best health shape I've been in probably 20 years. And there's just no way. And so I was like, it must be MS. And he's like, I think we should go back to urgent care. And I'm like, in my brain, I'm like, what are they going to do with me at urgent care? If I actually do have MS, like, what are they going to do with me? And so he's like, maybe we should go, maybe, and, and trying to ask me, like, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to urgent care? And I was just like, I don't know. I couldn't think clearly.
No.
At all. And so he finally took me by the hands and walked me over to the bed and he sat me down on the bed. And he said, what do you want to do? And he said, he looked me right in the face. And as soon as he looked me in the face, my left side was drooping. And he's like,
Wow.
that's when I was like, okay, we're going to urgent care. And he said, we're going to urgent care. And he's grabbed my phone and he said, where did you go when you went on Tuesday? And I still had it pulled up like in my search engine. And so I said, this is it. And so I handed it to him and he said, okay, I'm going to get an appointment. And so he looked to get an appointment. There was one appointment left for that day. And it was in 15 minutes,
Wow.
which we're like 10 minutes from there. And so he goes, get your shoes on. We're getting in the car. We're going to go. I'm going to finish like putting in your symptoms and stuff into the registration. Anyway, and so I go, okay, great. And so I get my shoes on and he walks me out to the car and we drive to the urgent care. And as soon as I walk into the urgent care, a nurse comes and meets me there. And because he had put in my symptoms, left side weakness. I mean, this sounds ridiculous now that I say it. Left side weakness, blurred vision, headache, all of these things that are very typical now that I hear it of stroke, right?
Yeah, but you didn't know.
I had no idea.
Until your face started to droop. Those could have been symptoms of, like you say,
lots
a
of
migraine
things.
or tiredness or whatever, right? Like
Exactly. And so the nurse comes and meets us and she does a couple of neurological tests and she says, I'm certain you're having a stroke. You need to go to the hospital because they need to do a scan and figure out what to do. And so the closest hospital was like a mile, maybe a mile and a half away. So he just went to the closest hospital. Yeah, it was very close. So we went to the closest hospital and then.
How were you when she said that? Were you freaking out? Or were you just kind of out of it and not really knew?
I was kind of out of it. Yeah. At that point, I really was. And from this point until the next couple of days, I very quickly lost, I don't want to say consciousness because I was kind of in and out. I was unaware. I was unable to contribute to the conversation. I was very sleepy. I just kept kind of dozing in and out and not really being aware of what was going on.
I'm sure your husband was freaking out though.
Oh, he was absolutely freaking out. Yeah. And so he put me in the car and drove me to the hospital and we went into the emergency room. And if you've ever been to an emergency room and walked yourself in, it's a wait, and so we just sat down and we're like, we'll take our turn. And we had been told at the urgent care that they would call the hospital and tell them we were coming. I still don't know if that ever happened because we waited a long time. But after a while,
that's unfortunate. You didn't go up and say, I'm having a stroke. I need to be seen out.
I'm sure that my husband did. I you know how it is in a hospital. Anyway.
Sure, yeah.
And so we waited and waited. I mean, we were there long enough that somebody from work, he had obviously not been back to work that afternoon. Somebody from work sent us food because we hadn't had lunch, or now it's like getting closer to dinner time. So they sent us food. So we're like sitting in the waiting room. And I remember my husband like feeding me bites and then me just closing my eyes again and like going kind of back out and him like, okay, are you going to eat? Are you going to eat? And I was like, just closing my eyes and going back out. And at one point, I think I said to him, I need a blessing. It came out. I don't know if he brought it up or I did, but I was like, I need a blessing. And for those who don't know what a blessing is, it's where those who have what we believe is the power of God on earth lay their hands on your head and bestow a blessing of healing or comfort or whatever to you. And, this is just him and I. And usually for a blessing of healing, it's two people. And so I I was like, we don't have anybody else. And he was like, I don't either. And so he just bestowed
Yeah,
a
but
blessing on
the
me.
priesthood works.
Yeah.
It's fine. God's not that
Yeah,
picky.
yeah, exactly. And later on, I was telling my dad that I had gotten this blessing, and I was like, I don't know if it counted. And my dad was like, oh, it absolutely counted.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I got a blessing like right there in the, emergency room or whatever. They took me back and did some scans or whatever. And then they eventually came out and said, yes, it is a stroke. You have had a stroke. And the reason why is you have what they call an arterial dissection. You have a tear in your carotid artery.
In your
Usually
carotid
in
artery.
my carotid artery, yeah, which
Oh,
is this one right here in your neck. It's a main
the biggest
artery.
one that feeds your brain.
Yeah, and it was obstructing the blood flow. So the inner lining, it has like two linings. The inner lining of the carotid artery had like kind of
Pulled
pulled
away.
away and was kind of like a flap and had
I
started
mean,
to clot around it.
a full dissection, you're dead in seconds. Like,
Yeah, and so
wow.
this had started to happen, and so they said the protocol for this is we do IV blood thinners. So we're going to put you on IV blood thinners. We're going to have you kind of stick it out overnight. We'll do another scan in the morning and see what the story is. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm out of it at this
Yeah.
point, like well out of it. So my husband, of course, had no idea what was going on. Like, doesn't know what any of this means. They kept asking me questions like, are you a power lifter? Have you been in an accident? Have you had any aggressive chiropractic? I'm like, literally nothing. Do I look like a power lifter? I'm 115 pounds and 5'4". Like, no, I am not a power lifter.
Yeah,
So
clearly not.
there was just clearly no reason for this to be happening. Anyway, so they put me on these blood thinners and then they take me for a scan the next morning. And by this point, I really was out of it, like out. And he said overnight, I just got less and less responsive. They would come in and try and talk to me, and I was just less and less responsive. And so I had a scan the next morning and they said, okay, at this point, your carotid artery is 100% blocked. Like it's fallen all the way down that inner lining and it is completely blocking this artery. And so
Oh,
we have to
wow.
do surgery and we have to do it now. And we don't have the capacity at this hospital to do that. So we're
Oh,
going to
goodness.
transfer you, by ambulance to another hospital here in Birmingham. And so, your podcast is called Beyond Coincidence, but I don't believe in coincidence. Like what is the likelihood that I would have been in Birmingham with my husband, not by myself, in this situation, and they're now taking me to a hospital that is known around the country as being a teaching and research neurological hospital. And
Wow.
so, yeah, so they take me there and I immediately went into surgery, like so fast that my husband drove his car over there and they'd given him my hospital room and I was gone. When he got to the room, I was already gone and headed for surgery, prepped for surgery. And so
Wow.
someone came and got him and said, hey, we need you to sign all these, consent forms and whatever. And so he did. And they gave him the spiel of like, we usually have 90% effectiveness with this surgery at getting 50% opening, like back opening of the artery. And they were going
Okay.
to put in a stent. And so he was like, great, and they said, we've had really good success. It's fairly common. We do it fairly frequently. And so doctor was feeling really confident about it. And he said, it's about an hour and a half long surgery. So now you remember my first symptom was Monday night. We're now Friday afternoon, right?
Wow.
And so the doctor goes in and my husband goes to the waiting room with lots of other people. And he's in that waiting room and an hour and a half goes by and more time and more time and more time. I think he said it ended up being like 4 or 5 hours that
So
he
he
was
was
there.
panicking.
He was panicked. Yeah. And after 4 or 5 hours, the doctor finally came in and said, she's doing fine, but, which is, you never want to hear, but we had some complications. And he said, we tried really hard. We were trying to do it laparoscopically. So what they do is they go in through your femoral artery, which is the one in your leg, in your groin, and they trace that artery all the way up to your brain. And so he did it with a scope and he traced it all the way up to my brain. And he was trying to get that scope through that blocked artery, that flap that was down, and he couldn't get it to go through. He's like, I just couldn't make it happen. And he said, I've done this surgery so many times, but I just couldn't make it happen. And so I don't know even to this day what inspired him, but he said, so I did something I've never done before. I called in a vascular team. He said, we have a vascular team here in this
Oh,
hospital who just happened to be
right.
available,
Not a
happened to have
coincidence.
Right, happened to have just finished surgery and happened to have still been in the hospital. And I called them. They have a bigger scope. And so I called them in and they came in with their scope and came in through your left femoral artery and traced it up the left side, up over the top of your brain. And he said, then from the top, they could see an opening. And so they went in
Wow.
and he said, I'm
That's,
here.
Emily, that's
Yeah,
wow. I
wild.
was an x-ray tech for many years and I was part of some of those, and they just don't do that.
No,
Like
it's
to go up
wild.
over top, that's just
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
sort of risky and but
Absolutely.
really forward thinking.
Yeah, and so he
Wow.
did he said, I'm in here. I guess what he told the doctor, what the doctor told us later, he said, I'm in here. I'm going to go ahead and place a stent in here from my direction because I can see it. And as soon as he placed that one, the doctor from the bottom, who was still in there, said, I can see now. And so he placed another one from the doctor did it from the top and he placed it from the bottom. So I actually have two stents that
Oh,
overlap.
intersect.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
So they placed those
To just
stents and then he
hold that
to just
artery
hold it
open.
open. Yeah, yeah. And so he came back out, and when he told my husband this, he said, we actually got 100% opening, which is just unheard of. He said, we really hoped
Yeah.
for 50% opening, and we got 100% opening. So he's like,
Wow.
I mean,
But
all
that's a
things,
beautiful miracle too,
yeah,
right?
it is. Absolutely. All things considered, he's like, this was miraculous. And so he, they sent me to the neuro ICU where my care was absolutely phenomenal. And so when I woke up the next day, so this is now Friday night, when I woke up the next day, I had no feeling in my left side, none, no
Oh.
sensation, no feeling. I had no coordination between my left side and my brain because it's a right side affected. When your right side is affected on your brain, your left side is impacted.
So you couldn't feel your whole left side.
I could not feel anything. Yeah. So he would
Oh
like
my goodness. I would
my
you were you
husband,
just like freaking out? I mean, again, I'd be
I
freaking out.
wasn't yet, because here's the weird part about this, which you can't understand unless you've experienced, which I hope no one listening to this ever experiences this. But what you don't know is that my brain was telling my body, do this with your hand. And it thought it was doing it. So unless I
Oh,
could actually look down and see that my hand wasn't moving, which I wasn't awake enough to really do, I didn't know, what was happening. So like
right.
my husband said, that the nurse would like say, squeeze my hand. And I would say, am I doing it? And he would say, yes, you're doing such a good job. And my husband, he'd look over at my husband and be like,
And you
nothing's
weren't moving your hand
happening.
at all.
No, nothing was happening. There was no movement in my hand or foot or anything. And they were like
But I guess
poking
they
me.
wanted to give you positive reinforcement so that you didn't
Yeah.
shut down and give up. Is that why they said
Yeah,
that?
I'm sure. But he was, they were just so encouraging. They were like, you're doing so good. You're healing. So, they're so positive and so uplifting and so great and so sensitive. Think about all the things that are impacted, right? My speech was impacted. My ability to swallow and breathe was impacted. Like everything on your left side is impacted. My bowels and everything was impacted.
Yeah.
And so they were just so, so wonderful to deal with. But so this is now Saturday. They're really trying to get me to wake up and see what I can do. And I really just can't do anything. And I was stable at that point. I think Saturday or Sunday, they moved me to a regular room. And
Okay, so you're in the ICU for only just like a day.
just like a day or two, maybe. I'm not exactly positive, but it all kind of runs together,
Yeah.
especially when you're not really cognitive and aware at that point. And so by Sunday, my husband was like, we got to get cracking. And so he sat at the end of my bed, and we're car people. We love cars. And so he said, we're going to get this car moving, this manual transmission foot to start moving so you can start pushing the clutch. And so he sat at the end of my bed and just rubbed my leg and like pushed on my foot, and he was like, push back, push back. And I was like, again, my brain was sending the signals like push, just I was trying so hard, like just push the clutch, and nothing was happening. Out of nowhere, boom, my foot just moved. And he's like, you did it.
Within a few days.
Yeah. He's like, you did it. And I'm like, okay, we did it. And so he's like just massaging my leg. And he's like, as much feedback as we can give your body, like that's what's going to get your brain to recognize
So
that
was
it
he
exists.
told that? Like, did the doctor say, "Hey, massage will help," or did he just sort of
Yeah,
innately
I
know that?
don't know. I don't know that, because at one point I remember him saying to the physical therapist that came in, he was like, "Does this help? Like, is this good?" And she was like, "Oh yes, any kind of sensation that we can get back, if she can get you to feel that, then yeah, that's great." And so he was just going and going and going, and my foot was moving, and I was pushing harder and harder. And he was like, "Yes," he was so encouraging and so amazing. And by this point, my son had also driven from Texas. He lives in Texas with us, and he had driven from Texas to Alabama to be with us because
Oh, sure, because
we
now
had,
your kids are like, "What's going on with mom?"
yeah, I have a kid in Arizona. My daughter was in Arizona. She lived there. I had a kid in Idaho who was at school in Idaho, and I had a daughter on a mission in Montana, and then my son in Dallas. So we had no family. Like nobody knew what was really going on. And so my son had come, and he and my husband had given me another blessing, administered with oil, and that was amazing too. And it was kind of cool too. In that moment, he got to say, like, the nurse came in and he's like, "Hey," I think that was right when they were about to move me to a new room, and my husband was like, um we want to give her a blessing real quick. And he was like, oh, we really need to move her. And my husband was like, this is a religious thing. Can we just do, it'll literally take a minute. And he was like, oh yeah. As soon as he said it was a religious thing, the nurse was like, well, yeah, take your time and just let us know when you're done, which was really kind of cool too, to have him experience that with us. We thought that was kind of cool exposure, if you will, for him to be able to see that that was important to us. And so he let us do that and kind of walked away and then moved me to another room. And anyway, so I'd had another blessing, and as soon as the physical therapist heard that my foot was moving, she was like, let's go, let's get you up. And so they did. They got me up on my feet,
Oh, wow.
which I still didn't really feel that. I couldn't really feel the muscles or feel what was going on or anything, but I knew there was something happening. And I was like, we're going to do this. I was like, if this is helpful and this will help us get back to reality, then we're going to do this. And
So is the
so,
plan to sort of, as your brain heals, it starts firing again? Like it
yeah,
starts, body's be able to, oh yeah, move the hand, move the foot. So
the way that
more, how does that work?
one of the doctors, the neurologist, described it to us. He's like, imagine you have ants that are on one side of a valley and they're trying to get to the other side of the valley. And those ants have always crawled this way across the valley and up to the other side. He's like, now those ants, that section of valley is closed. There's been a cave in or something. And now they have to find another route. And so he's like, that's literally what we're trying to do, is we're trying to give your neurons a different pathway to be able to make this still happen and find another route. And so,
Well, that's a good way to explain it.
yeah, I thought that was really cool. And he's like, we just need to find some way to compensate. And we don't want to not, your first thought is, well, I can't use my left hand, so I'm just not going to use it. But in reality, it's like, use it wrong. It will fail. You'll drop things, and whatever.
They just
And
wanted you to
so,
sort of start
but
getting
you
that
have to
sensation
remind
going.
your body. Yeah, you have to remind your body that your hand even exists. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And so it really
And is
was
that a brain thing? Like is it a mentally exhausting thing or just physically exhausting?
mentally exhausting. Yeah,
Because
absolutely
you're trying to
exhausting.
make your hand move and it's not. Like,
Yeah. And so I just was so fatigued the whole time, which is still a problem. Fatigue is still an issue. But yeah, it was so mentally and physically and emotionally exhausting. Like every time they're like, move your hand. And I'm like, it just can't, and I just cry and cry, which is so hard on my husband and my son. And like, it was just so sad. It was so like pathetic, the whole situation. And I was like, okay, but we got to get moving. Like, and so the nurse or the physical therapist came in at one time and she was like, what are your goals? And I was like, I want to walk myself to the bathroom. That seems really simple, but I need to walk myself to the
yeah.
bathroom. She's like, okay. She's like, we're not going to do it unassisted for a long time, but we'll help you. And so they got me a little walker and walked me 4 steps. And then I was like, now I'm tired. I got to go back, and lay down, and 4 more steps and then lay down. And so that was really all it was for a little while. And I still actually didn't have use of my left hand yet. It was still, I think, 2 more days. I think it was like Tuesday when my husband one morning was like, say good morning and squeeze my hand. And I did. And we both just cried and cried. And we were like, there it is. It's here.
Wow,
It's
that's
just kind
actually
of
pretty fast, isn't
spontaneous.
it?
Yeah. 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 It really is. And so, and they attribute a lot of this coming back so quickly to that 100% opening that they got of the
Oh, because you
artery.
were able to get 100% blood flow back to
Yeah.
your brain
Yeah.
rather than only 50.
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow.
And so as soon as I like started movement, I was like, okay, now when do we get out of here? Because like we're good. We're not at home. I need my grandbabies are at home. I got to get going. And so they were like, we really want you to go to a inpatient rehab facility because your first steps, your first few days and weeks and months are really the most critical. If they can get the most rehab done and the most connection of those neurons made in those first few months, your long-term rehab just looks better. And so they said, we want to go to inpatient. And they said, we have some facilities here. Well, that wasn't going to be good enough for my husband. He was on Google and he was like, best rehab facilities in the US. And what the number one was in, like, I think Boston or something. And number 2 facility was in, no coincidence, Texas. And he was like, okay, we're going back home. Only it was in Houston. We're in Dallas. It's about 3 hours from us.
Still, that's
But
better than Birmingham.
yeah, exactly. And so he's like, can we put her in a car? Can we drive her back to Texas? And the doctor was like, yeah, you just about every hour, get out, walk her around and move those. We got to make sure blood
Oh,
flow
so
is
you had to
really
stop every
going.
hour. So what's the drive
Yeah.
between
It's
Birmingham
about,
and Dallas?
it's about 10 hours
Oh, wow.
normally. And so we had to stop it. It took us a little longer than that, but
And did you go
yeah.
home or did you go straight to
So I went
Dallas?
home. Well, first of all, my husband called that inpatient rehab facility, and they were like, "We're pretty booked," and he was like, basically begged. I don't know what he said because I wasn't aware, but they were like, "We have 1 bed left, one, and you can have it." And so our
Well, that's kind of a
insurance took
miracle
it.
too.
It was absolutely a miracle. And so we drove back home to Texas, and I stayed one night in my own bed. I got a shower in my own bed, my shower, my own shower. And then he put me back in the car and drove me back down to Houston, and where they checked me in for another 2 weeks. I was in Houston rehab.
So you
But
were 1 week in Birmingham and then 2 weeks as an inpatient
2 weeks
in
as an inpatient in
Houston.
Houston, which
Is that pretty intense?
that's very intense. It's all day, every day. And so
Oh,
you start at 8 a.m. and it's like 30 minutes of PT and then 30 minutes of OT. And then you get a rest. And then it's 30 minutes of speech therapy. And then it's 30 minutes of music therapy. And then it's 30, so it's literally go, go, go
so
all day
music
long.
therapy.
Yeah. Which was, I absolutely loved. I thought that was
Well, if you're a
amazing.
vocalist, yeah. So was that
Yeah.
like they wanted you to sing, or was it playing the piano, or what did they have you do? What is
I
that?
had some speech trouble. And so my another coincidence, my best friend actually lives in Houston. And she and I had always, she was my pianist when I would sing, and I was her pianist when she would sing. And so she would actually come, and she one day brought a bunch of choral music and was like, let's sing. And we went down to kind of the far end of things. And she was like, I'm going to play the keyboard and you sing. And it just wouldn't come out. And I was so distressed because I was like, my vocal cords are still obviously like, I don't know, paralyzed or something's not working. It's just not,
So
it's
you
not
just
working.
couldn't sing at all.
I just couldn't. I still really can't, which is very upsetting to me, but we'll get there. We'll
Yeah,
make it happen eventually. But
yeah.
but
I
the
mean, you
the
don't have any speech impediment at all.
really, really not. When I get tired, I start to have a little trouble. You can see my words get a little jumbled, but I
Is
really,
it the thought process being jumbled, or is it your tongue not moving, or is it both?
yeah,
Like,
it's a little bit of both. Like my brain says, say this, and my body has to take just a little. It's like delay, if that makes sense. Like it sends it to my
okay,
mouth, and my mouth goes, okay, I'm about to say this, but wait just a second. It's gonna take a minute to come out.
oh,
And
okay,
so it's
interesting.
just
And
a
that
just
happens
a
still when
little
you're
bit of,
tired.
yeah, when I'm tired. Yeah. Yeah. And so, but in therapy, it was like so intense. It was so intense. Therapy was, and it
Wow.
was amazing, and it was so great. And another little tender mercy is our former bishop. He had moved from where we live in Dallas down to a city called McAllen, Texas, which is not close at all to where I was. He had been a rehab doctor for years and years, and that was his background, was rehab. And so he drove from McAllen to where he was to Houston to visit, because he's like, I just need to get my eyes on you and see exactly what the situation was.
Wow, but that's
And
cool
so
too. That's a
it
sweet
was
tender
so,
mercy
it
that you
was,
knew him so well as a bishop, like as a pastor of your congregation. He knew
yeah,
your family, he knew you, he knew how
yeah.
you were before.
And his
Wow.
background really shared some things with me that I nobody else had talked about yet, about what my rehab would look like. And that was a huge blessing to me, that I had that little insight from him, as to like, he was sitting there talking to us. All of a sudden he goes, I'm going to get up and go now. And I was like, no, you don't have to leave. And he's like, no, I can see you're getting tired. I can tell you're getting tired. And I was like, yeah, I guess I am, And he said, I can see the fatigue. And he's like, and I said, is that normal? Is that a thing? And he said, yes, some people have that fatigue for the rest of their lives. Like, you may kind of grow out of it, but you also may have that for the rest of your life. And nobody had said that to me. And I thought I was just like not sucking it up enough, like not
Right.
working hard
So
enough.
rather than that being overwhelming and negative, you were like, okay,
I was like,
this is normal.
okay, okay, as long as I know that's the norm, now I can deal with it. Now I can
Right. I'm
expect
not
that, and
just
it's
being a weak,
fine.
whiny baby. This is the
Exactly.
norm. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, so
And
that was
so
nice of
so that
him to
was
say
really
that.
awesome. Yeah. So I spent 2 weeks there, and another tender mercy was my occupational therapist, who was absolutely phenomenal. I'm still in contact with my therapist.
So
They
explain
were
to people what's
amazing.
the difference between PT, physical therapy, and OT, occupational therapy.
Okay, so physical therapy, which is PT, is physical. Like, think of them as like a personal trainer. They're really working with basically kind of lower. I mean, they do everything, but they really kind of do lower half, like getting those legs to move and function the way they're supposed to. Like, they said to me, "Is there anything that we haven't done that you need to learn how to do?" And I said, "You know what? We have a hot tub at home, but it's kind of below ground, so I have to be able to get down into the hot tub and then get myself back out, because that I do love doing that." And so she's like, "Okay." So she set up this whole scenario of like,
Wow.
okay, you're going to move from here. This is how you're going to do it. You're going to put your hands here and kind of turn your body this way and get down in. And, so those are the kinds of things that they would do. an
And they're just
occupational.
retraining you how to do things maybe slightly
Yeah.
different because your muscles
Yeah.
are working differently.
Exactly. Like I said to her, she said, "What do you do at home? What are some things you like to do?" And I said, "I really like DIY, and I don't know if I'll get back to that." And she goes, "Oh, yes, you will." And I'm not kidding. Like within my first week, she's like, "Okay, here's our activity today. You're going to climb the ladder." She pulled out a ladder and was like, "Let's climb the
Wow.
ladder, grab these bean bags off the top, come back down, and then when you get down here, push up." And I was like, "Okay, do you remember that I just learned to walk like last week?" She was like,
Right?
"Yep,
And now you
yeah,
want me to climb
I
a
know.
ladder?
Now you want me to climb the ladder?" Yeah, but it was so great. It was so like personalized to me. And then an OT
That's
or an
cool.
occupational therapist, they're more like, what are things around the house? So like one day I said, I love to cook. We had been kind of in the process of looking at opening up a bakery before this happened. And so I said, I love to cook and bake. And so she's like, okay, tomorrow we're in the kitchen. They had a full kitchen there. And she's like, tomorrow we're making cookies. And so she brought in all the stuff to make cookies. And she's like, what would you, they just kind of talk you through it. Like, how would you stand to hold the mixer? Like, how would you normally hold I know you're right-handed, but you would probably hold the mixer with your left hand, right? And I'm like, yeah, I would. And so, they just kind of talk you through like, um, how you would function in normal life.
Like
That's kind of
rather
what an
than more
occupational
life
therapist.
skills type
Yeah,
of
more life
training.
skills kind of stuff. Yeah, and it's a lot of upper body. And so, but they really do a lot of overlap. And then a speech therapist and an occupational therapist do a lot of like cognitive therapy. So I wish I would have known then what I know now is how deficit I actually was as far as cognitive skills went. I thought I can talk. I don't need a speech therapist, but it was really far more like, can you solve these problems that are happening? Can you,
Oh,
and I,
interesting.
and I still have trouble with that. Like yesterday, I own a residential cleaning company. And yesterday we had a cleaner not show. And so I went out with one of my cleaners to do a clean and I got like all tangled up in the vacuum cord, which was like not a big deal. But at the same time, I'm like tangled up in this cord and I could not figure out, my brain just could not process how to unknot the cord, get my arm out, get it out, tangled out from around me. It's just those like things that you take so for granted as
Right.
just a normal person in everyday life. But
And so did
cognitively,
you figure it out and it just takes longer, or were you just
it
like,
just
I don't know how
takes
to do it?
longer. Yeah, early on, I just kind of would sit down and cry. I cried a lot in therapy.
No
But
doubt.
yeah, but I just kind of would sit down and cry and you eventually just kind of figure out we got to get out of the cord eventually, and so you just kind of have to stick with it and work through it and see the nuances of like, now I see this is connected to this, and so I've got to undo that and move this, and you don't realize how much of that you do every single day. Like when I untie my shoes, it takes some work to process how to untie my shoes. And
Interesting.
so,
But
yeah,
that's
yeah.
very normal after a stroke, though, right? I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And just to figure out how to work those two hands together, like my OT I was trying to tie my shoes in therapy. And she was like, okay, we might not be able to do it the same way you've always done it. Like, let's do it this way instead. Let's do bunny ears and whatever. And I was like, no, I'm going to get back to the way I was doing it before. It's the way
Yeah.
I've always done it. And so I really was like, I just kept trying over and over again. And eventually I did get it. And my friend took a picture of it the day that she took a picture of my shoe all tied and was so proud of me. Hey, you tied your
Uh,
shoe today. Anyway,
so you're still healing then, and it's been,
yeah.
or we're in April and it happened in January, so January, a year and a bit. So
Hmm.
you're still healing and noticing changes and stuff?
Absolutely. So, one of the interesting things is that I have to really give myself grace because, a lot of people said you'll kind of hit your 1 year mark. 1 year, 12 to 18 months is kind of where your plateau, and you're exponentially growing and changing for that first year to 18 months. And then it's just kind of like now it's just the nuances of what needs to change
Okay.
and develop. And so someone asked me just yesterday, she said, "Are you back to normal?" And I said, "Absolutely, I'm not back to normal." And I wish I was, but really what I'm doing is I'm finding what my new normal is and what I can do and what I'm able to accomplish. And so, like, for example,
You just get tired faster, do you think?
I get exhausted. So that's really what it comes down to. So actually I was joking with my husband because I was doing the like prep for this, like kind of thinking about things that, I was going to talk about and how I was going to talk about it here and before this. And then I showered and got dressed and ready. And my husband came and he's like, "Well, are you all ready?" And I said, "Well, now that I'm ready, I'm too tired to do the podcast." I said, "I need to go take a nap."
Oh, shoot.
Anyway, but that really is what happened. Like things that everybody does, I still do them. I just do them slower. I do them, at a graduated pace. I made a cake yesterday, and after doing that, I had to sit down and rest and just I call it de-stimming. I have to de-stimulate. I have to close my eyes and close my ears and put everything away and just sit and
And is that something that they taught you to
yeah,
just slow down?
because you don't realize how much processing is happening all the time in your brain. Like
Yeah.
actually going to church is something that's really difficult for me because there's lights and sounds and the organ. I feel like the organ pierces my brain every time I
Wow.
hear it, and kids moving, and there's just so much happening that you're constantly scanning, the crowd and listening and trying to listen to what speakers are saying and stuff. So I really actually had a really long time before I could even go to church. It was
It's just
really
so much
difficult.
stimulation.
Yeah, it was just way too much stimulation for me. And now I go and I actually wear my AirPods and I just put them on noise canceling kind of, and I listen as best I can, and still it gives me a chance to take the sacrament and be part of that, but necessarily hear everything that's going on and be
Yeah.
aware of everything that's going
Wow,
on.
I
But
wouldn't even have thought about that.
yeah. At the time I was serving in the Young Women's Presidency, which for those who don't know is like our youth organization for girls. And I was a counselor in that presidency and I absolutely loved it, but I just couldn't do it anymore. And my Young Women's president was so wonderful and stuck with me for so long. And eventually they let me go from that responsibility. And I haven't served a calling since then because I was like, I obviously can't serve in primary. I can't play the piano anymore because I don't have that ability in my left hand anymore. And so I was like, I really don't have much of a use anymore.
Oh,
Just this,
Emily, that's
it
not
was
true.
really, I know it really felt that way to me. Just this
Yeah.
last week, though, they did actually ask me to serve as a adult religion class teacher. And I'm like, okay, that I can do. I can prep at home. It's
Yeah.
a small group of
It's
adults,
quiet in there.
quiet in there. We can have as much discussion as I'm capable of that day, and if
Hmm.
I'm not capable enough of going, the full hour or whatever, then we can cut it short. I kind of run the show a little bit. And so
Right.
I'm really excited to have that opportunity to
Oh,
kind of
that's awesome.
get back into that, and serving again. Serving is so important to me. It's always been important to me. And so doing that is really important. And yeah, but I just look back, getting back to the whole purpose of this is we moved to Dallas 3 years ago. We had been in Arizona until then. 3 years ago, we moved to Dallas. And at the time, my husband was like, this is crazy, but that's fine. We'll take this job. We'll move to Dallas. And then a year after moving to Dallas, he got another job offer to take this job in Birmingham. And at the time, he actually had 4 job offers. And we just felt really like Birmingham is it. This job in Birmingham is it. And we felt really strong. It was less money, it was less opportunity, it seemed like. But we just felt like that was it. And so we are so grateful for that confirmation, because had we not been in Birmingham, where that neurological research and training hospital was, I would have not been with him. I would have been at home. We live out on acreage away from everything. I never would have taken myself to the hospital.
No,
I just wouldn't have. And they wouldn't have hired him if he'd have been in Arizona. They only would have hired him if he was like one trip from Birmingham. And
you're in
so,
Texas.
yeah, if we were in Texas. And so that was a miracle that we were in Texas, that he could take that job, that we were in Birmingham, that he was with me, that we were together. I was not alone. Just miracle after miracle after miracle. We saw the hand of God all along the entire way. And I was just so grateful to have that.
That's yeah, and and you just saying that part of the prequel to the story, is a firm belief that I hold to. Like I've shared my story a few times and I talk about before, during, and after, because for me, the experience for me has been 40 years. It'll be 40 years this summer. So
Wow.
I have a huge, wide perspective.
Yeah.
But there is prequels. And if you pay attention to those really hard things in your life, you can see the Lord moving before it even happened. Like you say, it was 3 years
Absolutely.
before. I met my husband 3 years before my family died.
Yeah.
And he was the exact man that
That
the
you
Lord
needed.
knew I needed to allow me to grow and to feel loved, because he only had one brother. They didn't even have a daughter. And
Yeah.
so I know that the Lord is aware, that he sees the big picture, he knows the plan, and that he's involved. I mean,
Absolutely.
and yes, sometimes we don't get the miracle, but it doesn't mean he's not there.
What's interesting to me is when people say sometimes we don't get the miracle, like you just said it. I think people would have seen the miracle as this had never happened to her. Life went on as normal. I see the miracle in all of the things that happened to prevent it from being worse. I
Yes,
think that's the miracle, right? I
yes.
don't think that I didn't get the miracle. I think I got exactly the miracle that I needed. I even said to my husband, he feels a lot of guilt of like, what if I had noticed sooner? Because we were days, right? From Monday to Friday when I actually had surgery.
Sure.
And he was like, what if I had noticed sooner? I had taken you in sooner. I had forced you to go back to urgent care
It wouldn't
sooner.
have
And I
mattered.
was like, it happened the way it had to happen. I needed
Yeah.
to be at that hospital in that moment with that doctor, with that vascular surgery team as
Yeah, because
well.
if you had gone a few days before, the vascular team may not have been there.
Exactly. I was like, and I have lots of podcasts and stuff that I listen to about stroke recovery as well. There are so many people who are like, I went to the hospital. They said, there's no way you're having a stroke, and sent them home. And I really think if I'd have gone in and said, I have a headache and a little bit of blurry vision, they would have been like, so what? Go home.
Right. But you were
I really
extreme by
think
then.
I was extreme by then. I had all of the symptoms. I had all of the situations that would have had forced them to say, there is really something going on here. And we really need to take this seriously. So I absolutely believe everything went just as it had to go to get the kind of result that we got today.
Yep. So what would you say is the greatest thing you've learned from this experience?
Two things. Number one, my husband is my greatest advocate because
What's his name, by the way? We didn't say his name.
Eric,
Eric.
Eric,
Okay,
yeah.
we love Eric.
Yeah, we love Eric, and everybody calls him Rico around here. But anyway, we love our Rico, and he is my greatest advocate. He fought to get me into that rehab facility. And after I left the rehab facility, I went to full-time outpatient rehab here in Dallas, which was every day, same thing, from 8 to 5, all day in Dallas, which was about an hour from us. And so we'd get up early in the morning and we'd drive all the way to Dallas. And then he worked from home at the time, but he couldn't leave because then we had a lunch break and blah, blah, it just didn't work out. And so he sat on a uncomfortable chair in the rehab facility and worked right there in the rehab facility for 2 months while I did rehab every single day.
Wow.
So that's the first thing I've learned, is that he's my number one. And I always knew it, but he's the one that I couldn't do life without. And I really couldn't have gotten to where I am without him, for sure. And number two, God is in the details of our life, the nuances. Even something as simple as music has always been really important to me. And when I hear the spirit, many times I hear it speak through music. I'll
Me too.
hear the words of a song, I'll listen to music, and when I hear the music, it reminds me, or the spirit speaks to me and says, this is something that needs to happen, that you need to do. There were many times in therapy that happened. I know we're like running really long, but I have one
No,
quick
no,
experience.
no,
Can I
no,
share
that's
it?
fine. I told you it was fine.
I know. So when I was doing the outpatient rehab and we were driving this drive to Dallas every day, I have never been a like, woe is me kind of person. I've never been like a why me, with all my hair loss and all the experiences that I experienced with that. I had never been like a why me kind of person. I've always been like a, what can I learn from this? What can I help others learn from this? And that has always been something that's been important to me. But I was having this moment this one day. It was like a weekend, maybe 5 days in, and we were driving that drive to Dallas, and I was like, why are we doing this? This is so ridiculous. I hate this. I hate everything about this. This is so unfair. Not that it should ever have happened to anybody else, but this is my life now. This is my life, and this is how it's going to be for who knows how long. And I was in so much pain because I was like sore. I was doing all of this physical therapy, and so I was so sore, like literally from my chin to my toes on my right side, because I still didn't have a
All
lot of
your muscles were
sensation.
just hurting.
Yeah, just hurting. I was so
Like
sore.
you just worked out really, really hard.
Yeah, that's
But now this
exact.
is every
And
day.
yeah, but every day for 5 days or however long it had been. And I was just so upset. And I cried and cried and cried all the way there. And when we got there, my husband was like, okay, you got to go in. It's time. We're here. You got to walk in there now. And I was like, okay, I got to walk in the door. And so he's like, go into the bathroom, splash some water on your face, kind of suck it up, figure out what you got to do, just get in there. And so I went into the bathroom, and I cried and cried and cried. And then I literally was like, I said a prayer in this public bathroom, which now I look back on and I was like, why did it take you that long to pray this prayer? But I was like, you've got to give me peace. It was almost more like a discussion with my Heavenly Father.
So
Like,
we've been almost a
I
month by this time. Almost a month.
this had
Mhm.
been more than a month. Like I was now out of inpatient and into outpatient. And so I was just like talking it like, I have to have peace. I don't know where it's going to come from, but I have to have it. I have to feel peace, because if I don't, I cannot keep doing this. I cannot keep going. And like I said, through music is where I usually feel the spirit the most. And one of my favorite hymns is actually Where Can I Turn for Peace? And it always has been kind of my favorite hymn. And the words so clearly came to me in that moment. I have it in front of me because I know I wouldn't remember it Where when my aching grows, where when I languish, where in my need to know, where can I turn? He answers privately, reaches my reaching, in my Gethsemane, Savior and friend. And those words like came to me so clearly that he was reaching me in a public bathroom in the middle of Dallas, Texas, that this was my Gethsemane and he had been there and he knew what I was experiencing and he had felt it. And I was absolutely not alone, that I was okay, that I was going to be okay, that I was strong enough and I could do this. And so sure enough, I did splashed some water on my face, dabbed my tears, kind of sucked it up. And I was like, please just help me survive this day. And I walked in, and my personal assigned PT, my physical therapist, was gone for the day. And she always made me do the elliptical machine the first thing, which I hated so much. It was such good exercise, but I hated it so much. She was gone for the day. And the PT that was helping me was like, you know what? I don't think we'll do the elliptical today. I think we'll do something else. And I was like, yes, we will. You know why? Because
Tender
I just said
mercy.
a
Thank
prayer
you.
in a public bathroom. And so she strapped this like 20-pound weight on me and we went and climbed stairs, which was so difficult. But I was like, great. It's great compared to the elliptical. I don't have to do the elliptical. I'm good. And it was just such a tender mercy to me that my PT wasn't there for that day. But later in that day, I was in a speech therapy session and we were in kind of a group sitting, which didn't typically happen. And there was another man in that group session and we had kind of finished our session. We were done a few minutes early and we were just sitting around talking and we were kind of talking about our own experiences and how we'd gotten to where we were with our stroke stories. And he was saying that he had been telling a friend what was going on and his friend obviously didn't understand. He just kept saying, I don't understand. I don't understand my purpose. I don't understand what I'm doing here. I don't understand. I just don't need to be here anymore. And he had said that to his friend. And his friend was like, don't you ever say that because God has a plan for you. And in that moment, I could sit there and he got real emotional. And this was not a guy who gets emotional. And he got really emotional. And I was so grateful in that moment because I had just had a spiritual bathroom experience and I could share that with him and I could say, absolutely, God knows you. He knows what you're going through. You're okay. And we don't know what our, situation is and who we need to reach out to with this experience, but we have a plan and there's a reason we're here and you'll figure out what yours is and I'll figure out what mine is. But in that moment, I had again received that personal witness that he was there with me and that I had this was my Gethsemane and that he was my savior and my friend and he was with me. And I was so grateful for that. And I left actually that day, like on this huge high, like I'd gone in so miserable and so awful. And I left on this huge high. Like I felt like I had made a difference to somebody else, even in my dark moment, in my
That was
being
part of your
upset.
answered prayer, right?
That was part of my answered prayer is not only could I in that moment see what was my value and my what was important to me, but I could also use that to help somebody else feel and see their importance to God
Right.
and where they belonged in this world. And I was so grateful for that experience.
Right. And therein came a lot of your peace, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
you just
absolutely.
needed.
Yeah,
Okay, so before the final
absolutely.
question, I have one quick question. Give me the symptoms that if I had, like for stroke, like if I was having these symptoms, I should be like going to the hospital.
I'm so glad you're asking this because, like I said, when I had
Just
those
for
symptoms
awareness, right?
and I Googled them, I was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. I'm not having a stroke. So
Because it can happen at any age. It's
it
not
can
just
happen
an
at
old person
any age.
thing.
And that's what I'm actually learning is it is not unusual for it to happen younger and younger all the time. Like
Wow.
many, many people that I've talked to, probably I would say that
Men and women alike, right?
men
It's
and
not
women
gender
alike. Yeah.
specific.
Yeah. Again, I had no high cholesterol, no high blood pressure. Those are the typical like precursors to stroke. I was
Sure.
absolutely healthy, which is kind of terrifying in itself. But what they say in the stroke community is they say FAST, FAST, face, arm, speech, time. So face is your face drooping? Is your physical face looking different? Arm, do you have arm weakness on that same side? Speech, is your speech slurred at all? And time, if any of those things are happening, you're against the clock. Get to the hospital. And so you don't wait, you call paramedics, you get going as fast as you can.
And you
So
don't drive
just
yourself.
exactly, you don't drive yourself or go to pick up your husband or any of those crazy things that I did.
Yeah, but you didn't know.
Yeah, exactly. You get to the hospital as fast as you can. And so that absolutely is something that people need to be aware of. Face, arm, speech,
Speech
time.
time. Oh, that's
Yeah.
a great anachronism.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah. So just a final question. Why do you think it's important to recognize the hand of God in your life?
So it's important, I think, because first of all, everything we have is from him. It's because of him. It's from him. It's a gift from him. Everything we think we own in this world is actually his, that we have stewardship of. That's what I believe. So I think it's a way to be grateful, is to recognize, first of all, that everything we have is from him. But I also think that it's really important to recognize the details. I think you have to be looking for the details. So something that I've been doing lately is, it's really easy. You see whatever you look for, I guess, is what I'm
That's
coming
true.
to, is if you're saying my husband is really bothering me, I'm going to look for all the ways that he bothers me every day, and I'm going to point them out to him. All you're going to see is all the things your husband does to annoy you, right? And so if you're trying to see the hand of God and you're looking for it in your life, those things will pop out to you as you go throughout your life. And so I think it needs to be on the forefront of your mind. And so I've been doing that even with my recovery, is if I zoom out, right, instead of like keeping really close view of what I'm doing, I zoom out and I say, okay, how have I improved today since last year at this time?
Right.
And instead of saying even today from tomorrow, because I may not have a lot of recovery or change from yesterday to today, I have to zoom out and see what I see, but I have to constantly be looking for my victories in my recovery. And so that's the biggest thing for me, is like, you have to be looking for the hand of God in your life. And if you're looking for it, you will see it everywhere. You will see it in the sunrise. You will see it in the face of your children. You will see it in the responsibilities at church and work. You will see it everywhere you look, but you have to be looking for it.
Yep. No, I agree 100%. Well, thank you so much, Emily. I truly appreciate you coming and sharing your experience and your hand of
Thank
God
you.
story. I really, really do. So thank you so much.
It was a blessing to be here. Thank you so much.
Okay. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for listening. If you have an experience where you have seen the hand of God or your higher power in your life, I want to hear about it. Please send an email to Sheila@beyondcoincidence.com. Have a great day.